where we are as a nation and what the future is for our children. We have, at this point in time, $12.6 trillion worth of debt. We have equivalent now debt for every man, woman, and child in this country, $42,000. For our children who are under 25 years of age, in the year 2030, each one of them will be responsible for $1,113,000 worth of debt and unfunded obligations. If you think about what that means, what that means is, is our children that are under 25, the ability for them to experience the opportunity that we as a nation have experienced in the past 230 plus years is going to be put at risk. We have before us some things that need to get done. They have to get done. And we have two options. We can add another $9.2 billion to that $12.6 trillion we have today and bump up more than that $113,113,000. Or we can relook into the mirror and say, should we as Americans start making some of the hard choices that are going to be necessary for us to get out of the mess we've created for our children. And when I travel around the country, and I travel in Oklahoma, Americans are concerned about our future right now. And what are their concerns? What does it boil down to in their heart? In their heart, they have this gripping sensation that what they've experienced as American may not be available for their children. It's a painful, painful realization. And what their hope for us is that we might change that outcome for their children. We have an opportunity to start that right now. By way of background, most of us know that there is a tremendous amount of waste, fraud, abuse, duplication in the federal government. And oftentimes it's hard to weed out because every program, whether it's efficient or effective or not, has people that tout it. And our nature as politicians is to offend no one. That's our nature, is how in the world do we accomplish what is going to be necessary in the next 5 to 10 years and solve this most difficult problem that we, the politicians, have created. America didn't create this. The states didn't create this. This problem was created here in Washington. And as it's often been said, the easiest thing in the world is to spend somebody else's money. And so the earnestness with which I come to the floor is to say we ought not be doing that, especially when we know there's waste and there's fraud and there's duplication and there's abuse in much of the federal government. You know, I was reminded of the trouble that the state of New Jersey's in. And what the people of the state of New Jersey have said is that we recognize the problem and we need to change things. And so they elected a new governor on the basis that he would make the tough decisions about priority to change the future path, help me out here a little bit.
Please order in the chamber so the senator from Oklahoma can continue his talk.
That he might change the path of the future for the citizens of New Jersey. And he put forth a bold budget. Matter of fact, one of the Senate Democratic leaders is helping him fix the problem. So you have a Republican governor with a bold plan who's come forward to the people of the state of New Jersey. They elected him by a fairly large margin and said, for us to have this great future that we all want for our kids, is we're going to have to do some things that aren't necessarily pleasant, but they are necessary. You know, it's kind of like when you have a child. Hey, Jeff, will you stick around? It's kind of like when you have a child and they have to take a medicine, or the first time you take a child to the pediatrician's office for their first set of shots. That's an easy visit. The hard visit is the second visit, because they have a memory of getting the injections the first time. And so all of a sudden you have resistance to a medicine or a vaccine that actually fixes the problem, but there's a small amount of pain with it. So the governor of New Jersey has started out on a bold, fresh course, not because he's a Republican. It doesn't matter what they are. The fact is the people in New Jersey, in a bipartisan manner, recognize they have to make changes. So we have unemployment insurance, we have COBRA, we have flood insurance, we have the docks fix for 30 days. We have all these things in front of us that we all agree we want to get done. Where lies our disagreement? It's very simple. One says we'll declare it an emergency, not pay for it, and send the bill to our grandkids. The other's saying maybe it's time that we quit doing that. What is the expectation of the American people in terms of how we should respond to that? Well, a recent poll said 72% of the American people, not divided by party, pretty neutral between both parties, say the number one issue in front of us as a nation is our debt. And we just had a warning from the rating agencies just 2 weeks ago that the United States of America is about to lose its AAA credit rating on its bonds. And if you watched bond prices yesterday, what you saw was yields shot up. Yields, the interest payment that we're going to have to pay for when we borrow a huge amount of money, is going to rise. One of the most significant things we could do to help ourselves is send a signal to the world that we're not going to wait until our bond rating crashes, that we're going to start making the steps and taking the steps that are necessary for us to get back on a road to fiscal health. And with all good faith, I think the majority leader and the minority leader tried to work out an agreement where we could perhaps accomplish this. We didn't get there. And so, therefore, we find ourselves where we're going to have a debate. And we're going to have to discuss in front of the American people, if we do these good things, and they're good, should we get rid of things that are a whole lot less good to do these, or should we take the immoral choice and not make any choice at all and just pass it on to our children and grandchildren? I think that's really the question of where the American people are today. The majority and the president have had a great victory on health care with not partisan differences, but policy differences with my side of the aisle. And that's now the law of the land. And whether you believe CBO and how it's scored or not, the fact is even if it saves that amount of money, that doesn't come close to solving any of our problems. So we've had these multiple month-long extensions, of which none have been paid for, at about $9 to $10 billion a month. And we find ourselves, because we want to go home, or we want to go to a Codell, or we want to campaign, or we want to fundraise, that we want to make it easy and just pass it on down to the next generation. And I find myself that I can't agree to that anymore, ever again. That in fact, if we're going to spend money on things we know we ought to do, then the obligation ought to be on us to get rid of funds that are spent on things that are very much less important. And that's the hardest thing a political body does, is that they end up isolating and irritating those that are well connected, that have an interest in those lower priority items. It's hard for us, because as our nature is we want to offend no one. But we're going to have to talk that out. And I guess we're going to have to talk it out on the floor. And we're going to have to debate it. And we're going to talk about what our true long-term future is if we don't change. I would rather us not be at this point. But when I wrestle with my own conscience, and as I visualize my grandchildren and the grandchildren of everybody in this body, I think it would be immoral for us not to have this debate. Now, I don't know what the outcome of the debate's going to be and the ultimate result, but I can tell you it's a legitimate debate that we ought to be having. And we ought not to be just having it on this extender package. We ought to be having it on any new spending in any form that the Congress does. You know, one of the large segments of the Recovery Act that some of us disagreed with was the amount of money that got transferred to the states to help them through this fiscal crisis. And when you look at that, when we did that, what I believe, and this is my personal belief, and I'm sure many of my colleagues wouldn't agree with it, is that we transferred the worst habit of Washington to the states, saying that there's not consequences to you spending more money than you have. And that although all these states have balanced budget amendments, and in my own state, even though we had to make some tough decisions because of the tremendous amount of money that came through the Recovery Act, we didn't make the decisions that we really should. And so now we're going to make them this year. And we're going to make very, very difficult choices about priorities in the state of Oklahoma with a Democrat governor and a Republican House and Senate, and they're going to get the job done. They're going to accomplish it because the people of Oklahoma do not allow their government to run their government on the backs of their unborn children. We don't allow it. We forbid it. We forbid it. We see it as immoral. And if you think about it, it really is. Because what we're doing is we are stealing future opportunities